I'm going to bring you the anchor of the story. Martha MacCallum was watching this along with me. And good day to you. It's almost 12 noon. That's something we don't hear all the time.
No, it isn't. And it's interesting to just reflect on the fact that a moment of silence, not a moment of prayer, but a moment of silence is something that is controversial. That's kind of a stunning thing to sit back and think about. But these are not the kind of things that we see happen in public school anymore. This is a very nice tradition, this National Day of Prayer, and you have all of these different faiths coming together, and the president, making some comments toward the end there about how they get through the witch hunt, and Mike Pence saying, with a little bit of help from God and from prayer. But you look at what's going on the other side on Capitol Hill this morning, and Nancy Pelosi laying into Bill Barr, saying basically that she thinks charges should be brought against Bill Barr for perjury in terms of what happened and what we watched play out yesterday.
We watched it. She said it twice. He lied to Congress. He lied to Congress. That was during her weekly press conference there. DOJ just came out with a statement on behalf of Bill Barr. It says Speaker Pelosi's baseless attack on the AG is reckless, irresponsible, and false.
So where do we go from here? I mean, it's up to the Democrats at this point whether or not they want to pursue impeachment. As Lindsey Graham said at the beginning of yesterday's proceedings, the report is done. And I couldn't help but think, after reflecting on this whole experience of watching the testimony yesterday, this morning, it's almost as if I don't think Democrats are really that angry with Bill Barr. They're angry with Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller is the person who did not deliver what they believe should have been delivered from that report. And I also think it's good to look back at Bill Barr's statement that he was surprised when Robert Mueller's folks came in and Robert Mueller said, we're not going to have a finding on whether or not there was any obstruction of justice. They were clearly taken aback by that move and wondering why, after 2 years and hundreds of subpoenas and thousands of hours of interviews, they felt that they couldn't find on that. So I think there's an enormous amount of frustration that this process did not produce what Democrats thought it should, and now they've got to figure out what their next move is.
And on that point, I think Jerry Nadler has a decision to make. What does he do?
Absolutely.
Does he file a subpoena? The ball is in his court as of today.
Absolutely it is. And as for right now, they're hiding behind having other attorneys ask the questions. Bill Barr didn't show up this morning, as we well know. But even that, seems like a big abdication of responsibility for the Judiciary Committee, which is made up of a lot of attorneys. I had Eric Swalwell on last night. He said, well, I'm going to ask my own questions. But, it's an odd place that we're in with all of this.
It seems Democrats have a new story now, and that is to call on Bill Barr to resign, which is not going to happen. But here are the presidential candidates so far. Just put the list up between Swalwell, Harris, Booker, Gillibrand, Warren, O'Rourke, Buttigieg, Inslee, and Castro. They all want Bill Barr to step down, and I would imagine there will be others who pile on to that same list.
Yeah, I'm sure there will. You have to ask the question, why? I mean, there's the fine point of the back and forth with Charlie Crist last time and the letter that we learned about this week. I think they are hanging their hat on that in terms of what they see as perjury. Bill Barr explained it differently yesterday, and he said, that he didn't feel that Robert Mueller had any dispute with the conclusions that were drawn in the letter that he drafted, but with some of the process of how it went out, he would have liked to have seen more of those summaries come out. It seems like a very fine point of distinction. And again, I think that the concern really with a lot of these folks is that they are angry. And I think Republicans know how it felt on the other side when Hillary Clinton, they didn't get the result that they wanted with Hillary Clinton after that investigation. They are wearing that hat right now.
You can read this report if you're a member of Congress.
Absolutely,
you can go to a secure area. There was a report earlier today that all of 2 members of Congress have done that.
And they're both Republicans.
And how many on that committee yesterday do you believe did that?
Yeah, Eric Swalwell, it's only the leadership that can go in and read it. But the leadership, Nadler and Schiff, apparently have not gone in to read the unredacted version, which is a good question for them.
See you tonight at 7 o'clock?
You bet. I'll be there. Good to see you, Bill.
Story then. Thank you, Martha.
Thanks,
good to
Bill.
see you, too.
You too.
A Republican member of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Tom McClintock of California. Congressman, a chicken in an empty chair this morning. No William Barr. Was it a good idea for him not to show?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. The precedent-shattering notion that elected members of Congress can hide behind counsel and asking questions or making statements, I think is rightly deplorable. We're elected and accountable to the people that we represent. That's why only elected members of the House speak on the floor. That's why only elected members of the House ask questions in committees, because we are accountable for those questions. We're accountable for the words that we speak. For the Democrats to try to hide behind their general counsel is just plain silly. But there's been a lot of that going on recently.
You know, it's interesting. So I did a little drill down to look at, how many members of Congress, the House and Senate are lawyers. You got a lot there. 53% in the Senate, 36, almost 37% have a law degree. They may not be practicing today. So when you look at who can really take the floor and ask questions, you have a lot of options there.
Well, I'm not a lawyer myself, but as you point out, there are many lawyers on the Judiciary Committee, and Nadler's insistence that they all go out and hire one to ask their questions for them tells me they're not very confident of their own legal skills.
I want to get to what it was like to be in that room, because you were there today, and it looked so much like spectacle. You're hearing people call it a circus.
I would call it an embarrassment. There was a decided lack of grown-up supervision in the leadership of that committee, and that's become quite apparent with all of the stunts and photo ops that you see the Democrats resorting to. But again, what they're trying to do, don't forget, for 2.5 years now, they have spun a complete falsehood that somehow Donald Trump was conspiring with a foreign government to corrupt our government. And it turns out that was all false. It was all dreamed up by the Clinton campaign. It was used by the highest officials in our government to try to influence our elections and then undermine, when they failed that, undermine the elected president of the United States. That's all now been laid bare as a complete lie. So now they're grasping for a new lie that they can come up with to try to cover the old lie that's now been exposed.
The Speaker Pelosi, and we played this for our audience just a few moments ago. They could watch it live on the network a couple of hours ago. Said that Barr lied to Congress, and she's calling for accountability. She says, he was lying to Congress. If it were anybody else, they'd be held accountable. Is she speaking the truth about William Barr?
No, she's making a ridiculous ad hominem personal attack on his integrity, which I think is deplorable. The fact is, William Barr spoke to Mueller after he received the letter and said, is there anything in the letter that's inaccurate? No, there's nothing in the accurate. Is there anything that we've said that portrays it inaccurately? He says no. His complaint was with the way the press was handling it. Well, that is not a complaint against Bill Barr or the letter that he sent summarizing the report that he then released to the Congress.
Then there's word, because we know the invitation has been issued for Bob Mueller to come and talk about his own report. Republican Senator Kennedy of Louisiana says he'd be fine with Mueller testifying about it. Let's watch.
If Mr. Mueller wants to come over here and explain why he conducted an investigation and spent a lot of taxpayer money and then couldn't make up his mind, I'll be happy to listen to him. Did the Mueller team recommend an indictment of Donald Trump for conspiracy or collusion? The answer is no. Number two, did the Mueller team recommend an indictment of Donald Trump for obstruction of justice? And the answer is no. And everything else is just cream cheese.
It's interesting. I interviewed Kellyanne Conway with the White House just a couple of weeks ago, and she said, no, we already know what Mueller thinks because we have his report, 95% of it not redacted.
Well, Mueller was assigned over a principal charge that the Trump campaign had conspired with the Russians to affect the election. That was his purpose. He determined at some point in those 2 months of investigation that was not the truth. Why didn't he report that at the time? Why did he let it go on so long? That's a very important question. But an even more important question is, at the center of this lie was this phony dossier concocted by the Clinton campaign. It was used as a justification to the court to spy on an American presidential campaign, on private American citizens. Why was that not delved in with more? So, yeah, there are a number of questions I'd like to ask Robert Mueller.
All right. Well, we look forward to that. Tom McClintock, Congressman from California, joining us today. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Andy, the ranking Republican on that committee who we saw earlier, Doug Collins, making the assertion that the only time somebody like the AG has been questioned by a staff member instead of by congressmen in that council before was during Watergate. Is that true to your knowledge?
Well, I thought I heard him say that in that committee, that particular committee, the Judiciary Committee, that it had never happened, and that it did happen in connection with Watergate with the special committees that they set up for impeachment hearings. But
so does that, if that's the case, does that make this an outrageous request, or is it that they know Barr is really smart and a fantastic attorney, and that they're not up to asking him the questions.
Melissa, a lot of this is sheer theater.
No.
Well, I mean, even more theater than normal Washington theater, which is the theater of the absurd. Barr, this was not an appearance under subpoena. All this talk about he may be held in contempt any minute now. They're not close to holding him in contempt. He can't be in contempt until he has flouted some kind of legal process, right? What happened here was he wasn't even asked to come. He volunteered to come to the Senate and the House on 2 consecutive days. And when you're a volunteer, as opposed to being summoned by compulsion, you can negotiate the terms of your appearance.
What would it mean if he were held in contempt? I mean, how do you define that? What's the punishment?
Well, look, Eric Holder was held in contempt in connection with the Fast and Furious investigation that the House was conducting. And I think other than the fact that his legacy is that he was held in contempt, it had absolutely no consequence. And I think that's what this would be too. But I don't think it will ever get to that point. Look, Barr was in a position, because it was a voluntary appearance, to say no. If they subpoena him, and those are the conditions under which they want to proceed, I think it'll be a much more momentous thing for him to say no, and I doubt he will.
And Harris, the point is that they want to view the Mueller report, which the leaders of this committee can go do in a skiff anyway.
They can. The grand jury testimony will not be included in that. But, Andy, you and I have talked about really how much more we would learn with fewer redactions anyway.
Yeah.
And what we know about that, reported on letter between Mueller and Barr about how maybe Mueller didn't like the way that the media were reporting that 4-page letter originally from William Barr is such a big deal. My problem with all of that, my question is, how much more can we learn that would ever change the outcome? I didn't hear Robert Mueller say that. We all have the letter. My goodness, it's everywhere. It's like it's a meme, for goodness sakes.
Harris,
and you can read it yourself, and it doesn't say that. But here's my question. There are 53 senators with law degrees. Doesn't mean that they're all practicing. That's a lot of people. You get into the House, and it's north of 36, 37% hold law degrees. These are some pretty capable folk already legally. I'm wondering why you need to go outside that circle for the House panel or committee rather, why you need to go outside. These people ought to be able to depose just about anybody.
Look, they don't need it. Now, they are the primary branch, and we always talk about co-equal branches of government. Congress is the primary branch of government. If they want to organize themselves in a way that they want to conduct a hearing and have counsel for both sides, they get to do that. And then if the Attorney General at that point says, I'm not coming, then it's more momentous. But I think this is all a show. And I go back to the point you just raised about how much more information would we get. 95% of this report is unredacted. The only thing that's unavailable to the leadership of Congress is the grand jury material, which the grand jury restriction is statutory, which means Congress could change it itself, number one.
They could change the rule or the law.
Nadler could change that himself.
Well, he couldn't change it. They would have to pass a law.
Why do you think they haven't done that?
Because they don't care about this. They want to create the impression that a cover-up is going on.